All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to break down a really ambitious, kind of mind-bending idea called CMAC AI. They're calling it a physics engine for society. That's a huge claim, so let's figure out what on earth that actually means.
Okay, so the whole thing kicks off with this really powerful diagnosis. We're living in a crisis of causality. What does that mean? It means the link between what we see on our screens and what happens in the real world, well, it's dangerously broken. And the consequences, as we're about to see, are surprisingly physical.
And to really hammer this point home, they introduced this concept called the Gaza effect. They describe it as a kind of invisible physics. The idea is all that information chaos on our feeds, that digital entropy, it doesn't just stay there. It literally converts into biological stress in our bodies. A headline from thousands of miles away can actually physically change your heart rate. And all of a sudden, information has a biological price tag.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the problem, what they call the Stage 8 trap. Then we'll get into the new way of thinking that CMACI brings to the table, its core tools, and what fuels it. We'll even see how it applies to a real-world crisis. And finally, we'll look at the ultimate goal, building a bridge to something called Stage 9.
So let's start with the problem, the Stage 8 trap. The thinking here is that this chaos we're all feeling, it's not random at all. It's a very specific, dangerous, but ultimately understandable phase they're calling algorithmic fracture.
So what's actually happening in Stage 8? Well, the AI is just doing its job, right? It's maximizing engagement. But the side effect is that it's sorting all of us into these perfect echo chambers. And inside your bubble, trust is super high. But between the bubbles, trust is at 0. And this makes the whole system incredibly fragile.
And get this, here's where it becomes real. They actually put a number on it. They claim that the wrong kind of content can have a measurable biological cost, like losing 5 milliseconds of your heart rate variability. Now, it's a bit technical, but the bottom line is clear. Your attention isn't free. Your body is footing the bill.
So, if that's the problem, what's the solution? Well, this brings us to the whole new way of thinking that CMAC AI is proposing. The idea is to stop just trying to forecast what's next, and instead create a whole new science of anticipation.
This table does a great job of showing how different this is from something like, say, Palantir. You can see Palantir is amazing at connecting the dots when the world is stable. CMAC, though, is trying to operate on a totally different level. It's less about what will happen and way more about the ontology of possibility, what could even happen in the first place. And here's the kicker. It's designed specifically for those chaotic moments, those regime transitions, when all the old rules just go out the window.
So the whole game changes because the questions change. It's not just about asking, hey, what's going to happen? It's about asking these 4 much smarter questions. First, what's the entire landscape of possible futures? Second, which of those futures are adjacent, just a few small steps away? Third, what kind of situation are we even in? Is it stable or is it volatile? And finally, knowing all that, where can we actually do something that matters?
Okay, but to answer these new kinds of questions, you need a whole new set of tools, right? So let's look at the core building blocks, what they call the primitives, that make this whole new science work.
First up, we have this idea of the future space. Now, don't think of this as a crystal ball with a single prediction. It's more like a map of every possible future that could unfold from right now. So the question isn't where are we going, it's what does the whole map even look like from here?
Next up is this really cool concept called adjacency. Basically, this is all about action. It measures how many small changes it would take to get from where we are now to any of those possible futures on the map. And why is that so powerful? Because it tells you what's near, what's within reach, which is often way more important than what's technically most likely.
And this right here, this might be the most critical tool in the whole box, the regime indicator, or Kappa hat. Think of it like a smoke detector for reality. It doesn't predict a fire, it tells you how much smoke is in the air. A high value means things are stable, predictable. But a low value, that's the warning light flashing, telling you the system is volatile and a tiny spark could start a huge blaze.
Okay, so we've got the theory, we've got the tools, but what fuels this whole engine? This is where the civilizational monitor comes in, and we see how it's powered by a constant stream of real-world data.
And boom, here's that aha moment where you see how it all clicks together. This isn't just one giant AI model, it's this architecture of different layers. You've got the civilization layer, which is fueled by global events data from a source called GDALT. Then you've got the social or memetic layer, which is listening to social media fire hoses. And of course, the economic layer, pulling in financial data. Each layer gets its own fuel and has its own specialized engine to process.
And just to give you a sense of the scale here, let's talk about the fuel for that top layer. The GDELT project. This thing is a monster. It monitors news from all over the world in more than 100 languages, in real time. It takes all that messy, human stuff, all those narratives, and turns it into clean, structured data that the engine can actually understand. That's the raw input for understanding what's going on in the world.
Okay, let's stop talking theory and get real. How would this thing actually work in a super high-stakes situation? We're going to ground this whole idea in a tangible scenario, navigating the crisis in the Taiwan Cross-Strait.
So the first thing this system does is take this vague idea of escalation and make it totally concrete. It's not about feelings, it's this clearly defined crisis ladder. Every single rung, from just routine competition all the way up to actual conflict, is defined by data you can observe. And that concept of adjacency we talked about, well, here it means how many steps does it take to get from one rung to the next?
Okay, and this is the real game changer. The system's entire strategy changes based on that regime indicator, kappa hat. When kappa hat is high and things are stable, it uses all the standard tools, game theory, normal analysis. But the second kappa hat drops and the situation goes volatile, it literally throws out the old playbook. It knows those models are useless now and switches its entire analysis to running thousands of branching simulations to navigate the chaos.
All right, so let's pull back from that specific crisis and look at the big picture again. Because CMAC AI isn't just a forecasting tool, it's being framed as the actual solution to that Stage 8 trap we started with. It's about building, of all things, a civilizational immune system. The choice they lay out is pretty stark, right? On one side, we just keep going in Stage 8, where AI keeps fracturing us into these fragile little bubbles, risking a total breakdown. On the other side, we use tools like this to build towards a Stage 9, an era of what they call regenerative networking. The goal isn't to make everyone agree, but to build resilient trust bridges that connect our different worlds.
And what this does, really, is create a brand new market. It's framed as the shield versus the sword. The big platforms that profit from engagement and conflict, the chaos of Stage 8, are, in effect, selling the sword. CMAC AI wants to sell the shield. It's a system that actually profits from stability and societal health. And in doing that, it hopes to create a totally new kind of asset, one we desperately need: trust liquidity.
And that leaves us with this one final, really provocative question that kind of ties it all together. We started with this idea that all this information chaos has a real physical cost. So, if our attention has a measurable biological price tag, who's supposed to pick up the tab?